Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Simeon Jackson. I'm one of the steering committee who's put together this event. We've been meeting every couple of weeks for the last few months to try and get to this stage. So now we just want to give you this bit of a presentation about what a neighbourhood forum is, what neighbourhood planning is, and hopefully I encourage you to get involved. So what is neighbourhood planning? The neighbourhood planning process was something that was brought in 2011 by the Localism Act, and it's essentially so that communities can create their own planning policy and have an influence on how their area develops. It's written by the community, and it's something which the city council, when making planning decisions, has to take account of. It becomes actual statutory planning policy. In areas that don't have a town or parish council, which is a statutory body that can put together a neighbourhood plan, we have to create a neighbourhood forum to be that legal qualifying body to be allowed to put a plan forward. It must have a minimum of 21 members who are made up of people who live, work, and are elected in the area. But firstly, who are we? As we're the steering group on the left-hand side, and we're an informal group of people, self-selected group of people. It's not kind of any formal process that we chose, but it was quite useful to have that small group that could meet regularly and get things kicked off. And we formed out of a previous attempt to form a neighbourhood forum, which you may have heard of, the Cathedral Magdalene and St Augustine's Forum, who put together a few events, but in the end were not successful in being recognised as a neighbourhood forum by the city council. They put in an application, but it was refused on the basis that the area that it wanted to cover was too big, because it included not only this area but also the area around the cathedral. So after the failure of that one, we have taken a slightly different approach this time. We're not going to rush in to worrying about any planning aspects of the area, and are instead trying to focus on just making sure that our application to become a neighbourhood forum is successful first time. Yes, we've been meeting and inviting people, and slowly over the course of the last year or so, we've been building up support and momentum by forming a mailing list, holding Zoom meetings, and more recently, as many of you will have seen, sending out leaflets to residents. And now we've got over 170 people on our mailing list, and we feel it's time to step up to the next level, hold our inaugural meeting and start planning. So why do we want this? Why do we want neighbourhood planning in this area? Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, but here are just some of the things that we might want to achieve through neighbourhood planning. So we might want to make sure that local need is met, for example, for housing, especially affordable and social housing, and workplaces and employment premises. It may be desired to, for example, manage in planning terms the inevitable adjustments between uses, retail and office and residential following COVID. There's a shift of demand and shift to online retail, home working, etc., accelerated by the pandemic. And also smaller shop units are desirable than larger ones, many of which are falling empty. And there are also creative and tech outlets in this area, which currently are taking up some of the space in former warehouse spaces and office units, but may be pushed out by redevelopment. And then with respect to the local community facilities, it's important to note that the neighbourhood forum itself can't deliver those. It can't actually insist that new community spaces are created. That still has to be done by the council or whatever bodies it is that do that. But what we can do is allocate space for it within the local plan and indicate that there is a need for it. And the same kind of thing with transport infrastructure. That's generally done by the county council, but what we can do is say, this is what we think the area needs, and use that as evidence that the transport authority needs to take that up. And so further things we might want to do are look for opportunities to respond to or act on climate change. And that's not just because we need to tackle climate change, but also it may improve our quality of life through creating pedestrian and cycle connectivity, parks and open spaces, and making sure that they're protected, and improving air pollution, congestion, nuisance parking, that type of thing. And also with more extreme weather events, we may need to plan for the management of surface water runoff. And another thing we can do is influence design. So we can try and make sure that development in this area fits with the existing historic context. We can set design guidelines that new development should adhere to. We can promote low carbon and environmentally friendly design, and also look at other ways of improving our quality of life through planning and design. But ultimately, the neighbourhood planning includes anything that our members think is important, with the caveat that it is something that can be influenced through planning policy, because neighbourhood planning creates a neighbourhood plan that is neighbourhood planning is policy. So it's when someone does a development, i.e. puts in a planning application or makes changes to their property that requires planning permission, that is something that we can control through this process. And I'm sure many of you are asking, what can we do about Anglia Square? To what extent could the neighbourhood forum influence the development of Anglia Square? And one thing is to recognise with Anglia Square is the timeline that it's running on is kind of already set by the developer. This is their idea of where they're going to their timeline of what they want to happen when, and we are currently here, and we've many of you will have already put in some comments to a pre-application panel of things that the developer did a few weeks ago. But there's quite a bit more to happen. But the submission of the application they've set out as being in March 2022, which is really quite soon if we're expecting to create a neighbourhood plan before that. So that's not going to happen. And certainly if it's approved in July 2022, it's unlikely that we'll have anything even before then. So this neighbourhood forum is not really to set out what should happen at Anglia Square, but it is going to be looking at what happens in the wider context of this area as a result of Anglia Square. And there is a possibility that we can have some influence on what happens at Anglia Square. We might be able to put in some comments and set out some design principles that we generally want to be followed. But obviously we'd have to work on that quite quickly as soon as we became formed to have any influence on the design. So The next steps to actually become recognised as a neighbourhood forum so that we can start this planning process are to finalise our constitution. We've currently got a draft constitution, but it needs a few changes. We've been talking to Locality, which is a charity that is set up to help people create neighbourhood forums like this. They've given us some advice, and we need to make some changes to our constitution as a result of that. And then we are going to need an administrative committee, and although some of our members on the steering committee may continue on as members of that administrative committee, we certainly need some more people from amongst our members. So I really hope that that some of you are interested. And I apologize to the couple of people who are in the waiting room that I've only just noticed, but hopefully you are now in. And once we've got our constitution finalized, we can go to our inaugural general meeting and have that's where we elect our administrative committee and sign off our constitution formally. That's when we'd be a formal organisation, but we wouldn't be a formally recognised neighbourhood forum until we've got the designation, and that's the approval of the council to form a neighbourhood plan. And there are two stages to the designation. One is, or two parts of the designation process. One is to designate the neighbourhood area. And this has actually already been done, because when the Cathedral Magdalen and St Augustine's Forum were turned down, the council designated this area instead, and so they've said you can have this area, you can do neighbourhood planning for this area, which is the smaller area more appropriate. It's the same area as an earlier policy document for the area, which was called the Northern City Centre Area Action Plan, and that expired in 2016, so is no longer policy. So what we'd be looking to do is replace that with more up-to-date policy. And the other stage, the other part of designation is that the forum needs to be designated. And for that, we need to have a membership that is open to anyone living, working in the area, and the elected members for the area. It has to have a minimum of 21 members, and it has to have a membership drawn from the various parts of the area and from different sections of the community. And it also needs a written constitution and means of governance. And that's where we need your help. To fill our official positions, we're going to need a chair, treasurer, secretary, and also a few other members of the forum to help with governance. And we've put in our constitution provisionally that non-members, so supporters of the forum, can join that committee so that we can bring in skills of people who may not be eligible for membership, but still would be very helpful contributors to the administrative committee. So a bit more on what neighbourhood planning actually is. This is the kind of process. We've said earlier what the things we might want to achieve are, try to achieve. But this is the process of how we go about that. Neighbourhood plans are community-led, so we have to start with lots of engagement, with talking to people locally, and getting the input of the whole community. So that's not only the residents, but also businesses, community groups, schools, everyone in the community. We want to find out what's important to them and where they live, and what they want their vision for the area to be. And then we'll need to gather evidence to back up the ideas that the community wants to see. And this might be from existing documents and policies, surveys, research commissioned by experts, or commissioned by us, written by experts, and individual stories and comments from residents is also relevant evidence for this process. And then using all this feedback and evidence, we can then write the planning policies or employ a consultant to write them for us, and that will make the community's vision a reality. Sorry, that's we can write the policies that we think will make the community's vision a reality, and that would be our draft neighbourhood plan. And then there's a process that the plan has to go through to actually be formally adopted. So first of all, there's a formal consultation, which is referred to within the neighbourhood planning process as a Regulation 14 stage. That's a consultation that we do, just making sure that people have the opportunity to comment on the draft plan. And then after that, the responses have to be considered and the plan modified accordingly before it is submitted to the local authority for them to put to an independent examiner who checks that the basic conditions for neighbourhood plans are met. And that's something set in planning law, which includes having regard for national policy, contributing to the achievement of sustainable development, to be generally in conformity with the strategic policies of the development plan for the local area, and be compatible with EU obligations. Then, if the plan passes these tests, the local authority puts that plan to a public vote, a referendum, so that everybody who lives in the neighbourhood area can decide whether to support it. And if more than 50% of the voters are in favour of it, the local plan must bring it into force. And that means that it will be part of the statutory development plan for the area, and that any decisions about whether to grant planning permission or not in the area must be done in accordance with that plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise, which is a kind of legalistic speak for they have to have a good excuse not to. So that is what's referred to as the plan being made. And this slide just shows where that would fit within planning policy overall. It would become part of the statutory development plan for the area. So as I said, it means that any future development has to be in accordance with it, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And there are several layers of planning policy from the national planning policy framework. And at a local level, there are already several planning documents, a couple of which are due to be replaced quite soon with the Greater Norwich Local Plan. And that includes some specific policies for Anglia Square and one or two other development sites in the area. And so we'd have to be consistent with the policies within that document. We couldn't just turn that over. But there's still quite a lot of flexibility for us to set out our own policy here. And neighbourhood plans actually have the same kind of status as the local plan which is created by the council. It's not something which is subservient to it, that is that if one contradicts the other, they always have to go with a local plan. It genuinely has the same amount of weight as the local plan policy. And that's actually demonstrated quite well in a couple of the examples that I've got of where local plan policy or neighbourhood plan policy has resulted in real differences to things happening in the local area. So in Raydon, which is a village in Suffolk near Southwold, and an approved scheme had to be resubmitted to ensure that homes would be of the principal residence rather than second homes. Councillors had approved the proposal in principle in March 2020, but the plan had to be resubmitted following the introduction of the Raydon Neighbourhood Plan in May 2021. The homes will now only be sold to buyers who will use the property as their principal residence in keeping with the Raydon Neighbourhood Plan. And another example closer to home, Eastern Neighbourhood Plan. South Norfolk Council was taken to court by Eastern Parish Council after granting planning permission for a front extension on Marlingford Road in June, and prior to the decision, parish councillors called on planners to reject the extension, arguing it did not meet the policies in the Eastern Neighbourhood Plan and failed to enhance or preserve the village. And the High Court agreed with that decision, and South Norfolk Council had to admit its mistake. So I'm now coming to the end of the presentation part of this, and just want to say how you can get more involved, what you can do to help this happen. So one thing is to join the forum as a member. If you live, work, or are an elected member in the area, you can join the forum as a member. But it is important to note that that does come with certain responsibilities. Those who apply to be members, we will make sure you're aware of that before kind of formally putting you on our list as a member. Since we've been informed by Locality, that the charity that helps support neighbourhood plans, that our members really must understand what they are, what their duties are under that. And so if you don't want to become a member for either because you're not eligible or because you don't want to become a member for one reason or other, you can become a supporter, which means that you'll be invited to our events and can help volunteer and things like that, but you won't get that vote on the committee, vote on the forum, which is the difference between that and between members and supporters. And you can just be on the mailing list, which is another layer down. You won't be informed quite as often about things, but when anything major happens, we'll send an email out to the mailing list letting you know what's going on. Obviously, we'd really like some people to get more involved and to put themselves forward for the administrative committee. But even if you don't want to put yourself up for the administrative committee, there will be other opportunities to volunteer for specific tasks. And if you've got specific skills,